Africa is young and growing fast. Schools fail, markets bustle, and rural communities evolve. But can our food systems keep up?
In 2011, when I became the DG, after being a researcher for almost 15 years and the director of a program in Nairobi, and I was just coming to ITA with that mindset of leading a research institution. And in my first month, I started making visits with some of the policymakers, and I remember very well meeting the governor of Osun State. And I was very excited to introduce ITA to him and describe the strategy, which we have just finished elaborating. And he asked me a question, and actually he was actually disappointed by the support so far he had obtained from my predecessor, who had promised him to bring ITA to Osun State. And then he indicated to me, I haven't seen anything done by ITA in my state, and you are just too close here. So what's the need of ITA to state? That was a really tough question. And I remember I was there with my DDG, whom I had just hired to make sure that most of the technologies coming from research were scaled on farmers' field and so on. And when we left, went back to ITA, that my mind was set that research in itself, if it's not used, it's of no value. And at the time, we decided at ITA to create a department of partnership and delivery, because it was really very, very, very important that all the technology do not stay on shelf, but will be delivered. And in no time, the first experience of that was actually to scale the technology of introducing cassava high-quality flours in wheat bread, and that was the start of the journey at ITA, which basically helped a lot to let the policymaker understand the importance of research to the population.
Here, innovation becomes impact. Laboratory breakthroughs reach farmers, and families taste the results. That's science that touches us.
Agriculture is going to be the priority, and this continent is not going to behave differently from other continents that have developed. If you see the Europe, take an example is France, or take the US, agriculture is not only for food security, but is really for the strategic nature. No continent will develop without developing agriculture. When I was a young student, I visited China, and during the 74, China was a very, very, very poor country as compared really to Africa. And I went there as a lesson, and it was just after Nixon had visited China and they started to establish the relation between America and China. And the only advice Nixon gave to Mao Zedong during that period is if you want to develop agriculture. And during 1974, China had only one fertilizer company factory, I believe, one or two probably. But I went there probably 20 years later. China had probably more than 1,000 of fertilizer factory, and agriculture became the backbone of development for China. So Africa is not going to be different. You will need to invest in agriculture, you need to feed your people, and more than feeding the people, agriculture can be a source of funding and a source of employment. I'm going to illustrate that by what is happening today in my role as a special advisor to the president of DRC. So we are going to enter into a mineral deal with the US. In those places where minerals are, 70% of country resources come from those areas, 70%. But in those areas, that's the place where we find the poorest people. I think 70% depend on subsistence agriculture. So it's really very contradiction where you have the place which is producing basically the worst of the country, but in terms of human development, probably 70% are poor. So all what we're trying to say for the moment, we have to reverse that. The money obtained from the mineral deals should be reinvested in agriculture, and thus we can create a kind of society basically which is quite healthy, very well fed, and that basically can benefit from those minerals. I think the same thing could be explained in Nigeria, and especially in those places where oil, like in the deltas, where oil is really very important. And when you see that, we compare to the Human Development Index, and the nutrition base of those people is really quite poor. So all what we are saying now is very, very important, basically to develop and put a lot of investment in agriculture, parallel to the investment you are making in other sector of economy.
A country that feeds its people is a country that grows. China's fertilizer revolution shows a way. Meanwhile, Africa is still choosing mineral wealth over food security. But that narrative can change.
A good example of mindset with the leadership will be President Obasanjo. Basically, to see a leader who's had a lot of options, choosing to go into business, he could go for oil, he could go for any other type of investment in terms of services, but he's chosen and then spend all his time working on agriculture. And for him, agriculture not just like a passion, but is a source of funding, and is really very consistent on that. And I travel quite a lot with him, and we have been formed a business council between Nigeria and DRC, where we believe the investment in agriculture is going to be the key to prioritize development. That's an example. It's the high level of leadership. The other example is what the programs that we started at ITA with the youth. The youth, basically, the mindset change was to convince the youth to study communication like you, who even we see medical doctors who have taken interest at the young age in agriculture as a business. And we see there was a lot of examples of those who have succeeded there in Nigeria, and I see a lot in DRC for the moment. That mindset change has been really very, very important, and we started this program in 2012. I remember going to South Africa, invited by the MasterCard Foundation to debate of the role of agriculture into the youth agenda of jobs. And the British professor I was debating, team was to say that is not possible. The young people will never be interested in agriculture. And my hypothesis was to say, yes, well, if you follow the value chain, certainly this is what will enable you for the young people in university, irrespective of the domain that they've studied. I remember very well when the first evaluation was made by these young people before we started debating. Yes, 70% of them said agriculture is not an avenue for them. And after the debate, it was a reverse. 60% said, no, we're interested now in agriculture, because we had Dr. Sanginga presenting it very well. And that started the Youth Agripreneur Program. So those are examples of the change of mindset. And the last one, you must be aware of the program. We started them early program. It is called STEP, where basically the idea and the objective is really to change the mindset of the young girl and the boy to the secondary level. Start telling them that agriculture is not about just eating, it's going to be business. And so we convinced even the governor of Oyo State who funded that program for IT in DRC as well.
Beliefs shape futures. When students and leaders view farming as enterprise, untapped potential turns into opportunity. That's mindset's science in action.
Argentina is 4 times smaller than Nigeria, maybe 10 times than DRC. You take this is a simple crop of soybean. Argentina produces soybean, and also Brazil, and basically they make something like probably $50 billion on the land mass, which is 4 times less than where Nigeria can produce the same soybean. So Nigeria can produce probably soybean 4 more times than Argentina, and if you take the equivalent, then you can even gain for probably, let's say, $100 billion on that. And that's probably 3 times the budget or 2 times the total budget of Nigeria. They can get it for soybean only. That is just an example. So why are we not doing that? So it's not just about the food and the nutrition, but agriculture is going to become a security issues. Really, not more than just food security, but national security issues. If you could imagine, again, you can get from producing enough food, then you can sell it, you can export it. It can help you serve some other element of development, infrastructure, and so on. But we're not doing that. But we have also potential. But as my friend Adesina would say, we don't eat potential. And I'm talking about Nigeria. DRC is 3 times bigger than Nigeria in land area. Is so much. And we say this country, DRC, can produce a food that can feed the entire continent.
Food isn't just survival. It is power. Self-sufficiency builds stability. Exports build infrastructure. A nation that eats from its own land stands tall.
A good example of mindset of the leadership will be President Obasanjo. Basically, to see a leader who's had a lot of options, choosing to go into business, he could go for oil, he could go for any other type of investment in terms of services, but he's chosen and then spend all his time working on agriculture. And for him, agriculture not just like a passion, but is a source of funding, and is really very consistent on that. So that's an example. It's a high level of leadership.
When leaders walk the talk, change becomes visible. It's no longer theory, it's example, and examples inspire change. The future belongs to young minds and bold hearts. On this Bold Population Day, Africa stands at a crossroads, and agriculture is the road forward.
It's not just about the food and the nutrition, but agriculture is national security. We don't eat potential.